to our panel. The panel is going to be held in English. So if you need a, translation, we provide, headphone outside, just in the right side. So you can take your headphones. So today we are going to discuss mainly Turkish-American relations in the context of different, issues, mainly Syria, YPG, PYD, S-400, and other issues in bilateral relations. So we have three distinguished speakers. First, we are going to start with Robert Wexler. He is the president of Daniel Abraham Center for Middle East Peace. And then we are going to listen Mr. Ahmet Berat Jonkar. He is the MP in the parliament, Istanbul member of parliament. He is also the member of NATO Parliamentary Assembly. We have also Kadir Üstün. Dr. Kadir Üstün is the executive director of SETA DC in Washington. So I would like to start with Robert Wexler. So could you please, Robert, give us your idea about the current dynamics in Turkey-US relations and how both countries, can overcome the current, if you like, the crisis about different, subjects?
Sure. Well, thank you, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. It's a privilege for me always to be in Turkey, whether it's Istanbul or Ankara or anywhere else. I had the privilege of serving in the United States Congress for many years. I served on the Foreign Affairs Committee in addition to some other work, and had the opportunity to focus on U.S.-Turkish relations, and I did so because of the central role that Turkey plays in terms of American interests. And we've had crisis points in the relationship in the past. Unfortunately, this is not a new phenomenon. But this moment in time is arguably more serious in this sense. It's not a question, for instance, when the United States organized a coalition to invade Iraq, the Second Gulf War, and the Turkish parliament voted, I think, by one vote to not allow American troops to use Turkey as a launch pad to invade. That was a crisis point in relations, but it was a finite crisis, a crisis that was ultimately overcome relatively quickly, and compromises were made in terms of overflight rights and different ways to accommodate both Turkey and America's interests. Essentially, at that time, again as an example, the interests of the two countries were not going in entirely different directions. My fear now is, even though we are still close allies, it seems that to some degree it's inevitable that for its interests, Turkey makes certain choices, and America, for her interests, makes certain choices. And those choices are not purposefully done to harm relations with the other, but in fact they do. For instance, any American who has any elementary understanding of Turkey and her government and the emotions of her people should understand quite well the threat that the PKK and its related entities caused to Turkey, and the harm that has been caused to Turkish people for decades. At the same time, ISIS was, and arguably still is, the #1 threat from an American perspective in terms of terrorism at this point. And America made a choice, one that from a Turkish perspective seems unimaginable. How can America, the leader of the free world, choose to align with what Turkey believes, rightfully so, is a terrorist organization, to eliminate another terrorist organization? It's almost irrational. But that was a strategic decision America made. At the same time, not to compare the two as if they're identical, but Turkey has made a strategic choice to buy certain defensive missile systems from Russia. From an American perspective, it's impossible to understand, although when you get into the nitty-gritty, I would argue it's a little more possible to understand. But from many people's perspective in America, how could our ally, our NATO ally Turkey, go and purchase a missile system from Russia that will arguably endanger the air superiority of NATO, which NATO is completely dependent upon? Now, the experts can argue, in fact, what kind of damage it will do, but clearly, buying a major weapon system from Russia certainly seems to be at odds with a NATO ally that looks towards its European and American allies for its security interests. On top of that, and I apologize for talking so long, we now have an American Congress which is bitterly divided over everything, which has nothing to do with Turkey. And the one thing, seemingly, that Republicans and Democrats have come together on is a piece of legislation to sanction Turkey. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't favor that legislation. I don't think it's in America's interest to sanction Turkey, in effect, over the 400 missile system. In effect, we will be doing what we are, in theory, concerned that Turkey is doing, which is shifting its interest more towards Russia as opposed to the West and America. Now, I, for one, don't believe that Turkey's shifting, but there's this dynamic in the American Congress, Republicans and Democrats alike, that seems to suggest that people are believing that's the case. Let me just say one other thing, if I may. None of this discussion and political maneuvering happens in a vacuum. It's a product of a number of years of miscalculations on both sides and thorny, difficult issues. The imprisonment of Pastor Brunson in America was viewed as an illegitimate imprisonment. Now he has been released and that issue has been resolved. On the Turkish side, there's a view of the government that the American reaction to the coup attempt was not sufficient enough. I think there's some validity to that. The Turkish government believes that, in effect, America is harboring those who are responsible for the attempted assassination of President Erdogan. That, I think, is not accurate in the sense that America is not designing, not in any way or form, to harbor the perpetrators of such a terrible act. On the other hand, there have been Turkish requests to extradite Mr. Gulen, and I'm not someone who thinks the Gulenist movement is a credible movement. I don't at all, but we have a legal process in America to extradite, and you have to prove certain things. And the president just can't say, extradite this person. It's not the way it works. There is a very credible legal process that occurs. So there's frustration on the Turkish side on issues that are so closely held by the Turkish people and the Turkish government. And there's frustration on the American side, not only with the 400 missile system, but the notion that the group of people that helped us defeat the ISIS caliphate is now under siege from the Turkish military. We understand why. But this is where American and Turkish interests have diverged from one another. So we're at a very difficult time in our relationship, and it's unfortunate. We just had the privilege of meeting with your vice president, who was very direct and strong, and I say that in a positive way, in explaining Turkish interests. What both sides, I would respectfully suggest, are going to need to do now is to put aside past grievances. We both have them, and we both believe our past grievances are legitimately held. We both need to put them aside, look toward the future, and ultimately realize that America and Turkey, I believe, wholeheartedly, we are both better off working together through our disagreements, through our problems, and trying to find common ground. And there are issues in which the interests of the United States and Turkey still converge. Turkey doesn't want Iran with a nuclear weapon system. Turkey doesn't want an Iran that is overly aggressive and successful in the region. Turkey wants, as does America, a stronger economic relationship with the United States. I wish the two of us could figure out a way to strengthen Turkey's relationship with the European Union. There are things we can do together, and in fact have done together in Iraq. There are things we can do together to develop the energy sources in the Eastern Mediterranean that would benefit Turkey and the entire region. And one last thing, Turkey's relationship with Israel, while now it's not as bad as it was a little bit ago, can still be improved. And that doesn't mean that the Turkish government cannot or shouldn't issue disagreements with certain policies of the State of Israel. It's fine to differ with the State of Israel on settlement policy or a particular maneuver in Gaza. However, what Turkey should be doing is supporting those Palestinians and those Israelis who genuinely want to reach a negotiated two-state solution to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And Hamas is a terrorist organization, no different than the PKK. But Hamas comes here to Ankara and in fact does business with the Turkish government. Hamas rejects a peaceful settlement with the State of Israel. So these are the kinds of issues that we need to work through.
Okay, thank you. I would like to turn Mr. Ahmet Berat Jonkar. So you are the responsible to submit a report about Syria and its features under the framework of NATO Parliamentary Assembly. So, and you actually submitted your report. So in what sense that United States and Turkey, still converge on the Syrian file?
Thank you very much, Professor Yeşiltaş. I am delighted to be here with you, and I would like to also focus on my Syria report initially, but also I would like to contribute to the issues about Turkish-American relations. As mentioned, I am the deputy head of the Turkish delegation to NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and I am a rapporteur for the NATO Parliamentary Assembly in its Mediterranean and Middle East Special Group. For the last 1 year, I was elected to this position, and I decided to write a report on Syria. So this report has been submitted a couple of weeks ago in Jordan, and it was discussed and it was voted, and basically it has been an official NATO Parliamentary Assembly report as noted by the delegates who voted for the report in Jordan 2 weeks ago. So now we have an official report for the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. I would like to give some details about the findings in the report, and then we can maybe connect it to the Turkish-American relations. As you know, the conflict in Syria started as a civil war, but it turned into an event which has affected the Middle East and the international system as a whole, and it also has affected the bilateral relations of Turkey and the United States to a great extent. This conflict had huge humanitarian consequences. It has killed more than 500,000 people, mainly civilians, mostly civilians, injured over 1 million people in Syria, roughly 12 million people, meaning half of the pre-war population of Syria had to leave their homes, mostly out of the borders of Syria. This has put enormous pressures on neighboring countries, especially Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon. This has brought a heavy burden on Turkey as well, in many respects, together with other countries. Extremist terrorist organizations in Syria filled the vacuum created by the collapsing state authority in Syria. Daesh has lost much of the territory it once controlled. Its ringleader has been eliminated by the coalition with the support of Turkey and other allies. The fight against Daesh has been quite successful, we can say. However, it still poses a certain threat in different respects. In the report about Syria, I pointed out that Assad's survival is still an important issue, and it will have consequences for Syria as well as the broader region. For the Syrian regime, the situation changed dramatically with the help of Iran and Russia. Basically, they managed to control most of the countries, except the northeast part of Syria and the Idlib province, we can say. As I said, Russia and Iran's intervention in support of the regime has been very crucial and game-changing, I would say. Now Assad regime owes a lot to Russia and Iran in the future as well because of their support. Iran has expanded its influence over core decision-making in Syria, and it has reinforced its military influence in the country. It has entrenched long-term leverage by investing in cultural, economic, and religious channels of influence in Syria as a result of the conflict, and as a result of the disagreements between the allies like Turkey and the United States. As you know, the situation in Idlib is still concerning for all of us. There has been certain agreements between Turkey and Russia in order to control the situation, but still there is a threat for refugee movements from there. However, it was controlled after an agreement between Turkey and Russia. This relative calm on the ground has been maintained since that agreement, but it shows the fragility of the situation still for the region. Northeast Syria is the main area that remains outside the control of the Syrian government. As you are all aware, the Trump administration decision to withdraw forces from this part of the country has proven very divisive within the alliance and also within the United States government. Both the United States Senate and the House have voiced concerns about this decision as well. The decision to withdraw forces, US forces had brought criticism in the United States. Some US critics have suggested that the administration's decision to pull most of its forces from Syria has reduced US leverage in the region, ceded influence to Russia and Iran, and raised concerns about United States credibility. These are issues that we have highlighted in our report. But some other analysts in the United States argued that Syria is not a central US strategic priority and noted that over the long term, the United States was bound to leave this part of the country. Proponents of this view assert that the United States does not have long-term interest in remaining in Syria and as a result was not prepared to dedicate resources and lives to remaining there for a long period of time. So the withdrawal was inevitable in a way for some analysts for the United States. In any case, this situation in the northeast Syria poses great, significant security concerns for Turkey. Turkey has been worried about the establishment of an enclave that would provide sanctuary for the PKK terrorists. It had certain concerns that a continued US presence in Syria would provide cover for the PYD-YPG and enable them to build a kind of proto-state which would invariably conflict with Turkey's vision for regional stability. As mentioned, Turkey stressed very openly in all the platforms that PYD-YPG is the Syrian branch of the PKK terrorist organization. Moreover, Turkey stated that the PKK, PYD-YPG cannot represent the Kurdish people. That is to say, Syrian Kurds cannot be identified with the PYD-YPG. Turkish officials further state that as a terrorist organization, PYD-YPG has no legitimacy and does not represent the Kurdish communities. As you know, Turkey opened its doors to Kurds fleeing from Saddam Hussein's oppression in Iraq in 1990s and accepted over 200,000 Kurds from Ain al-Arab, Syria, Kobani, while incidents were taking place in the city. Another important issue we highlighted in the report is that United Nations, according to Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and the United Nations, PYD-YPG militants have violated international law and committed war crimes by recruiting children, displacing villagers, conducting arbitrary arrests, executing the PYD's political opponents, carrying out abuse in detention facilities, and conducting abduction and murder. These are all official reports, international reports. Turkey's position is that PKK and PYD-YPG share the same leadership, cadres, organizational and military structures, modus operandi, strategies, and the same tactics, same symbols. They have the same leader. They both draw from identical financial resources and conduct training exercises in the same terrorist camps. In essence, they constitute different parts of the same entity. Independent academic and international institutions, including but not limited to the UK-based Henry Jackson Society, the Institute for the Study of War, NATO's Defense Against Terrorism Review, and the US National Counterterrorism Center, as well as Europol, have pointed that the direct links between the PKK and PYD-YPG. So basically, this issue is quite clear. This is the Syrian branch of the PKK terrorist organization, which is the arch enemy of Turkey. For the last almost 40 years, this country has lost almost 50,000 of its citizens, mainly civilians. There is a huge, anger, I would say, and the Turkish nation is very upset about the relationship the United States has built with PYD-YPG, And some congressmen and congresswomen calling them as their allies is a big insult to Turkish nation, because openly this is the biggest enemy of Turkey. And in NATO, in a defense pact, our security should be indivisible. So basically, when you have the biggest national security threat, a terrorist organization, being supported by your most important ally in NATO, all the ground for the relationship between our countries is basically damaged to a great extent. All the other issues that you mentioned, the issue of the FETÖ leader, the purchase of the missile defense systems, and many other issues that can be talked about affecting the relationship can be discussed. But this issue lies in the core of the problem, because existentially, and Turkey cannot, the Turkish nation cannot put this relationship to a normal place, and no country can allow this kind of national security threat and an enemy of your nation getting support from your allies. So this is a very core issue. I think that we have some steps taken with the Trump administration's decision to withdraw its forces, at least for the safe zone area. The Turkish-US agreements and the Turkish-Russia agreements are bringing some hope to basically correct this problem, because we want the United States and all of our allies to distance themselves from PYD, YPG in Syria, and pressure them to basically leave their armed struggle against Turkey, and basically help for the work for the stabilization and peace in the region. So in the report, we highlighted all these issues. Of course, we have looked from different countries' perspectives, from the European countries' perspectives as well as regional countries' perspectives, to make it an objective report. But I wanted to highlight that without understanding Turkey's concerns, no NATO member country can correctly assess the situation and find solutions from there. So just to conclude, I would like to say that Turkey's relationship with the United States as an ally for the last almost 70 years in NATO, we give a lot of importance to our relationship with the United States. We would like to work with the United States, but of course we need to take action as far as solving the problems, and we need to start from the correct position. I will probably make some comments in the question and comment session regarding the certain issues about Russia, relationship with Russia as far as the purchase of the S-400s, the Palestinian issue, and the different other issues that you touched. But the main message I would like to share today is that the most important thing in a relationship is the trust between people, between us, and between the nations as well. If you lose the trust, you cannot build a relationship over that. So I think that these are good steps that we are discussing these issues openly together in Ankara or in Washington, D.C. But we need to do a lot as far as making the U.S. Congress especially to understand the real feelings and the real situations on the ground in Turkey, and to work on the issues together.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmet Berat. So Kadir, when I asked the title of this panel about your idea, you exactly proposed this title, overcoming the challenges in Turkish-American relations. So what are the challenges, and how two countries can able to overcome these challenges?
Well, thank you for this, Murad. I think the challenges already have been discussed by Robert and Mr. Çonkar. The challenges are immense, insurmountable in some ways. Some of them we won't be able to solve within the next couple days, weeks, months. And some of them are manageable, and then some of them are resolvable. So often we forget about the resolvable things because, you know, whatever the media is talking about is often the most important crisis moment. We can never underestimate some of the issues like Mr. Chonkar mentioned, existential threat that Turkey feels from this terrorist organization and how it's being supported, legitimized by the West overall, but I think US support is very critical. So not a lot of, I mean, I think Robert could dispute that all that much, but like he was talking about different perceptions of it, I wanted to talk about actually today different perceptions, attitudes, actions, and strategies these two countries often have, and they're often misaligned for a variety of different reasons. So the challenges are many, like how do we resolve S-400, how do we come to an agreement on YPG, how do we, you know, find a sort of win-win case in Eastern Mediterranean, how do we deal with Iran, it continued during, you know, in a time when Trump administration is applying maximum pressure, and then Turkey is dealing with Iran on Syria, in Syria, etc. So we can list a huge list of challenges. But I think some of the misalignments in both perceptions, attitudes, actions, and strategies have to be highlighted. I just want to give broad strokes about these, but I think they will help us. So when it comes to perceptions, and I don't want to go into the history of how we got here, I just want to highlight them. For instance, in terms of perceptions today, when Turkey looks at the US policies in the region, it basically says, you know, US is working against the interests of Turkey. That's the broad perception. So I'm not discussing, again, validity of this perception. I'm highlighting, I'm indicating that's the perception. In the US, the way Turkey is looked at is Turkey is no longer an ally. It's no longer really a reliable partner. And you get the same thing from Turkey. Turkey says US is not a reliable partner, an ally, because of the policies it pursues. On top of it, in the US, we have Trump himself, for getting along with Erdogan, as he would call it, right, is a big liability for him domestically. Domestically, it is the relationship between Trump and Erdogan is put in the category of Trump's relationship with, let's say, rogue authoritarian leaders, North Korea, Putin, etc. So now Turkey's, when you talk about Turkey in US media or US, you know, reports, etc., it's now becoming more and more put in the category of, you know, some sort of rogue nation almost, or unhelpful ally at very best. So when you look at these two perceptions, these are deeply divergent perceptions. How did we get here? I just put the question, I'm not going to answer it, right? That's something we need to think about. Attitudes, right? Attitudes, the US acts as a global superpower. The US has been questioning its role, global role, starting with Obama, right? Afghanistan, Iraq, we paid a lot of price, we didn't win anything, etc., etc. So US is going through soul searching in terms of defining its global role, right? But it still acts like a global power. You know, it asks allies to do some things. It asks institutions like NATO or others to do certain things. And then from Trump's, you know, the way Trump treats that global power, it has been questioned a lot as well, because he's using tools that were saved for like most urgent cases like sanctions. He's applying them right and left, depending on what, you know, policy goal he's trying to achieve at home and playing to his domestic base. But the bottom line, what I'm trying to say is that although US is questioning, rethinking its global role, it is still behaving like a global power, superpower, with the traditional, some of the traditional attitudes that are coming from Cold War years and all that. Turkey, right? Turkey's attitude is a regional power that is aspiring to play a global role. Not to become a global power. Of course, our leadership would definitely want to do that, but not anytime soon, right? But Turkey wants wants to be respected as a regional power that wants to play a global role in global issues and regional issues as well. But when they talk to each other, they often treat each other especially as equals, almost. Because at the end of the day, national sovereignty counts, right? And your counterpart has just as legitimacy as a political entity as you, right? But in reality, in the real world, the US is a global power, and it has certain attitudes related to that. And Turkey is a regional power, and it has attitudes related to that. So in terms of attitudes, I want to mention that in terms of actions, we often have this dilemma between tactical and strategic. With the case of YPG, right, it started as tactical. US policymakers assured Turkey that it was tactical, it was temporary, it was going to go away at some point. But now it turned into somewhat strategic. We can debate that, but it is not an easy relationship the US wants to give up anytime soon. Then for Turkey, I would argue S-400, especially at the beginning, was more of a capability issue, right? I want to secure my national defense. I want to create a national defense system that works for me, and I will purchase a piece of equipment that will help me with that. But partly because of US reaction, now we are having a much more strategic conversation around S-400s, right? Are we moving closer to Russia? Are we sort of creating path dependency by, you know, having to buy Russian planes in the future, and then our whole defense system, Turkish national defense, will gradually move towards Russia instead of the Western camp. So these kind of strategic versus tactical moves are something we need to keep in mind when we are thinking about actions of each countries. I think there's perception, there's a problem there as well. And then one more thing about strategies. When we're talking about the strategies of both countries, there is unilateral versus multilateral dynamics as well. So when Obama was the ultimate, I guess, multilateralist, and then now Trump is a unilateralist. I'm saying these, but of course there are many, many nuances to both leaders. You can argue that, X action was unilateralist and Y action was multilateralist, but broadly you could put Obama on the multilateralist side, where he wanted to work with other allies. He wanted to create agreement, consensus around things like global climate change, etc. But Trump is going against the grain, and he's saying, NAFTA is no good. Our agreement in the trade agreement in the South in Asia. I'm escaping. Its name is escaping me now, but he canceled the trade agreement with the Asian nations, and he's even questioned NATO itself. He attacked NATO, but now he's more happy about NATO. He's like, okay. But the point here is, when we are thinking about these, when you look at Turkey, there are things that Turkey will do unilaterally, right? But broadly, Turkish foreign policy is multilateralist. It emphasizes institutions, it emphasizes common defense, it emphasizes NATO, etc. The only thing Turkey did unilaterally was in Syria after the coup, going into containing PKK. And that is still, I believe, justified under self-defense, right? Murat, you would know more about this than me. But Turkey is also, in this changing world, changing regional dynamics, is going between these unilateralist versus multilateralist strategies. So I just wanted to highlight these dynamics and these dilemmas both countries have in terms of perceptions, attitudes, actions, and their strategies. So I hope this wasn't too theoretical, but I think they have a bearing on each issue we discussed, Syria, S-400, among others. Thank you.
I think we do not need a theory So, okay, we have three not different but common understanding in framing Turkey-U.S. bilateral relations and the main issues regarding the Turkey-U.S. relations. So we have a problem, of course, as Robert mentioned, mismanagement and communication problem, and rather than focusing on past grievance, we should look at future, how we should fix the U.S.-Turkey strategic relation. This is one of the important suggestion. So the second one, which is mentioned by Mr. Jonkar, is the problem of trust. The lack of trust is the main problem between United States and Turkey, and we should maintain the conversation between United States and Turkey, and the communication is a strategic channel to overcome the challenges. So Kadir, explain, I think, the perception and attitudes and the action and strategy. It's a kind of a strong combination between perception and attitudes and action and strategy. And now I would like to turn to you to, to collect your questions about all these, framework and all these suggestions. Does it make sense for you, or you have any, particular specific questions for the speakers?
May I just say one quick word? The Turkish people deserve an enormous amount of credit, which the Turkish nation does not receive often, for the manner in which the Turkish people have embraced Syrian refugees. And I understand that politically, at times, that's difficult, and it's not always a rosy situation. But unlike the United States, unlike many European countries, Turkey has become, I would argue, the model for the way in which a westernized, civilized country embraces millions of people that are in need, and you don't get enough credit for it. And I just felt remiss in not saying that while oftentimes Americans will criticize Turks for a whole host of things, in terms of Syrian refugees, we have an enormous amount to learn from you. And I just want to say thank you.
Okay. Translation if somebody asks question in Turkish.
My name is Sami Eker. I'm a research. Could you hear? Okay.
Yes.
My name is Sami Eker. I am a research assistant in University of Ankara. I want to ask my question to Mr. Robert Wexler. First of all, thanks for your presentation. Especially, I want to ask relations over NATO between Turkey and United States. You talked about mismanagement and the problem of connection, but some critics argue that relations between Turkey and United States very personalist. I mean, between President Trump and President Erdogan. So some institutional relations very low level, staying very low level. And what would be the future relations if Donald Trump doesn't elected in 2020 elections, and how it will its repercussion on Turkey-United States relations, especially on NATO? I mean, as we saw in last NATO summit and the advent of Trump's coming to rule, the transatlantic relations is broken. So in this perspective, what will the shape of Turkey and United States relations over NATO and other things? Thanks.
First of all, I would like to collect the questions. Any? Yes.
Professor Banu Eligür from Başkent University, Department of Political Science and International Relations. I would like to ask two questions to the speakers. My first question is, do Turkey and the US share the same threat perception vis-à-vis Iran? Because vis-à-vis Iran. Because Mr. Wexler mentioned that the perceived Iranian threat may be creating a common point between the two allies. So my question is, do Turkey and the US share the same threat perception toward Iran? And the second question that I'd like to ask is, how does Turkey regard the Muslim Brotherhood movement in Egypt? And does this match the US vision vis-à-vis the Muslim Brotherhood movement? Okay. Because there's the emergence of a different treatment of the Muslim Brotherhood movement by the Arab countries, mainly Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates. So after the Arab Spring and the developments.
Thank you. So your first question for Mr.
To all speakers.
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right. So we have a question over there.
I'm Ivan from Faculty of Security in Skopje, National Security Department. My question is for Mr. Robert and Mr. Kadir. Mr. Kadir mentions that US is currently soul searching in terms of defining its global role, and Turkey's regional power that inspire to act as a global player. So my question is, could Turkey in following 10 years become a victim of its own quest for power, facing the power curse phenomena, falling as a prey into a genuine power illusion, as the power curse phenomena manifests itself in four fundamental ways: adapting to complex systems, imperial overstretch, moral hazard, and vicious cycle of unilateralism? Can Turkey's foreign policy enough adapt and reinvent itself with new genuine policies that will not cause imperial overstretch due to unilateral political decisions embedded with moral hazard?
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, just a final question.
Türkçe konuşacağım.
Tabii tabii.
Robert Wexler Bey. Öncelikle merhabalar. Ben Uluslararası Kalkınma ve İstihdam Derneği Genel Başkanıyım. Robert Wexler Bey'e buraya, Türkiye'ye gelip burada SETA Vakfı'nda yaptığı çok ciddi açıklamalarından ötürü teşekkür ediyorum.
Sorry. Bir daha tekrarlayabilir misiniz?
Özellikle ben Barış Tapancı, Uluslararası Kalkınma ve İstihdam Derneği Genel Başkanıyım. Özellikle Robert Wexler'ın işte SETA Vakfı'nda bugün aramızda bulunmasından dolayı kendilerine çok teşekkür ediyorum. Türkiye ve Amerikan ilişkileri üzerinde çok ciddi açıklamalarda bulundu. Ve bu açıklamalar aslında basında da duyduğumuz açıklamalar. Sonuç itibariyle kendisinin bu konuda iyimser olduğunu ve Türkiye ile Amerikan ilişkilerinin normalleştiğini, normalleşebileceğine dair bazı bilgiler aktardı. Tabii ben şuna değinmek istiyorum. Türkiye uzun süredir Amerika ile ilişkileri iyi tutma adına Patriot füzeler istedi 10 yıl önce. 10 yıl önce biz buna ihtiyacımız var dediğimizde Amerikan sıcak bakmadı ve bakmadığı için Rusya ile S-400 anlaşması yapıldı. Ve tabii bunu yaptığında da şu anlamda Türkiye'nin meşru güvenlik kaygıları var. Tabii Türkiye'nin bu meşru güvenlik kaygılarından dolayı onların da bizi anlaması gerektiğini, tehdit ve yatırımların bir yararı olmayacağını ve hiçbir olumlu sonuç elde edemeyeceğimizi. Kendisi de Türkiye adına Amerika'da sesli bir şekilde bunları ifade etmesini istiyorum. Bir ikincisi bugünlerde dile getirilen bu Nobel ödülüyle alakalı kendisi ne düşünüyor? Avustralyalı yazar Peter Handke'ye verilen edebiyat ödülü dolayısıyla kendisinin görüşlerini almak istiyorum. Sonuçta Bosna Hersek'e yapılan bir katliam vardı ve bu anlamda bütün dünya bunu biliyor. Böyle birine verilmesi kendisi ne düşünüyor acaba? Teşekkürler.
Evet. Thank you. And we can start with you. Yeah, yeah.
I think we had 5 questions.
Yeah, 5 questions.
Or even more.
Yeah, the last one.
I guess we should go somewhat in order. The first gentleman asked about NATO and the transatlantic relationship and American-Turkish relations in the context of NATO and transatlantic relations. And what might happen, if I remember correctly, if President Trump were no longer president, what would happen? In this context, I think transatlantic relations are different than U.S.-Turkish relations. U.S. relations with European allies, the traditional European allies, France, Germany, Great Britain, to the extent that they are strained over a different set of issues than U.S.-Turkish relations are strained. The way to repair significantly traditional U.S. transatlantic relations is for America to become bold on global climate change again, for America to figure out how to resolve the Iranian nuclear issue, hopefully without using a military option, but engaging, if the opportunity presents itself, again in negotiation with Iran, but to improve the previous agreement, and to engage on trade issues, hopefully without the threat of sanctions being as prominent as they are today, for example. With Turkey, it's different. And I know we've talked about trust, and I would agree, trust is a major part of it. But it's not only trust. I mean, the truth is, there are some fundamental differences that actually are truthful. The truth is, we were going to beat ISIS at any cost. That was a calculation the United States of America made. And what Turkey is saying is, well, maybe that, you know, from our perspective, that's not so smart. That you don't go from a Turkish perspective and beat one terrorist organization by joining with another. So that's not about trust so much as it is we made a different calculation. And again, I'm not comparing the two in sense of saying they're the same, but we would argue, okay, Turkey may have some legitimate reactions to America's position regarding Patriot missiles, although I think America has made very legitimate offers to provide Patriot missiles. Turkey takes the position in part that they possibly were not as forthcoming, those offers, as we believe they were. But we would argue, even if Turkey's perspective is correct, that we weren't as forthcoming as we should be, or the price was too high, or the terms were not good enough. That's not a reason to go buy missiles from the antithesis of NATO, which is Russia. Again, that's not a question of trust. Now, do I understand fully why Turkey may have been frustrated with what they perceive to be the failure of America to provide Patriot missiles to the way Turkey wanted? Yes. But the truth is, the factual truth is, that America, through NATO, did provide Patriot missiles for a period of time, most recently. And then when the apparent threat seemed to be minimized, then they were removed. Now, normally a country buys the Patriot missiles. It's not a gift. They buy it and they implement it as within its defense system. So the expectation was that that is what Turkey would do. But Turkey chose a different path. Now, do I understand that Turkey has interests with Russia that we should be cognizant of? Of course. Now, there's a bigger question here, which I think relates to all of this, and that is, in 2008, Barack Obama was elected President of the United States to essentially do two things: rebuild the American economy from the devastating financial crash of 2008. That's why he was primarily elected. And the second reason was to get us out of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. That was 2008. The American people were already sick and tired of it. Too many people lost their lives, men and women, and an enormous amount of money spent. 8 years later, President Trump is elected on essentially an even more isolationist platform, very unusual for a Republican. At least in modern history in America, Republicans tend to be more interventionist. Donald Trump was exactly the opposite. So when he told or consented or agreed with President Erdogan to get out of Syria, And he suffered a great deal of criticism from sort of the elites in America. The truth is, President Trump was repeating exactly what he said on the campaign trail. He said, what are we doing in Syria? It's 5,000 miles away. And what's the lesson that many Americans, I would say a majority, have learned from our experiences in particularly Iraq, but also Afghanistan? The lesson is the American military victory can be quite impressive, fast, overwhelming, no match on the battlefield, but we still are not victorious. In truth, and I say this in part being critical of myself, I voted to give President Bush authority to go to war in Iraq. And our military did its job with the help of many allies. But the winner of the war in Iraq is really Iran. That's the truth. So Americans are taking that as an example, and they're saying, why should our young men and women die doing that anymore? So Turkish officials, rightfully, are looking at an America, even though we're still a global superpower, saying to ourselves, I think somebody used the word soul-searching. We are soul-searching. And we're trying to figure out, well, what price is legitimate to pay? We're in Afghanistan far more than we fought in World War II. How does that make sense? And it's not as if in World War II, at least at some points, I don't want to glamorize it, at least people met us with roses when we got to the town. Nobody's meeting us with roses anymore. So Americans are saying, forget it. So Turkey responds rightfully and says, well, wait a minute. We're looking at a world where maybe America isn't as involved in our neighborhood as it used to be. So there's a vacuum. And if there's one lesson I learned when I was in the United States Congress, and this is what frightens me the most, when America withdraws for whatever reason, and a vacuum is created, and it doesn't matter if it's in the Middle East or the Pacific or South America, much more often than not, that vacuum is filled with a power or an influence that tends to have very different views in America, and often, almost always, will have policies exactly opposite to America. And that's when catastrophes tend to grow. So that's, unfortunately, I think, the dynamic we are now in. And so Americans are nervous because our ally Turkey, who even if we maybe are not as trustful as we once were, we still trust you a lot more than we trust Russia, for sure. No comparison. Now we see our Turkish ally reacting to our withdrawal with purchasing a weapon system that our military experts say endangers NATO's air superiority. That makes us a little worried, cautious. All right, that's a long answer. Iranian threat, do Turkey and the United States perceive it the same? Not entirely, I don't think they do. For us, since the Iranian Revolution, Iran is a major enemy that we're not fearful of Iran, but you know, Iran is the country that screams death to America and death to Israel. So most Americans are beginning to say, well, maybe we actually should think they're saying the truth in terms of what their goals are. And the truth is, they've been seeking a nuclear weapon program. They've lied about it over and over and over and over again. President Obama made every effort to reach an agreement, a negotiated agreement. It seems now that in part the Iranians kept to it, but now we're learning they may have had some other secret dimensions where it shows they really weren't intending to keep to it. So we've learned at a minimum a lesson that the Iranian aggression on the nuclear front and on the non-nuclear front is a real threat to everybody. And it's going to take American leadership with our allies to confront it. Now, we don't have trade with Iran. You do, or you have economic interests. It's your neighbor. You have a desire to have closer relations with Iran. That's rational. That's legitimate. You don't need to have an arch enemy on your doorstep. That's not the way we feel. But I do think we have common interest in the context of nobody wants them to have a nuclear weapon. And you could argue that you'll be more in danger than we would be if, God forbid, they ever did. Where we may not have, I think, maybe, well, I don't want to be presumptuous. America will not let Iran have a nuclear weapon. Whether the president is Barack Obama or Donald Trump or whatever man or woman comes next, we will not allow it. I'm fairly certain of that, under no certain set of circumstances. I hope Turkey is as resolute as we are in that regard. In terms of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, detractors of President Obama said he wasn't as supportive of President Mubarak in that last couple of moments as he should have been. I think that criticism is not well placed, but the Muslim Brotherhood government that wound up taking place in Egypt, I think proved itself not to be particularly capable. And the Egyptian people, it's not a democracy in the fullest sense. They've made a change. And Sisi can be criticized for human rights violations and imprisonments and a whole lot of legitimate criticism, but the man is rebuilding an economy. He, from an American perspective, is a loyal or reliable ally. He's keeping the peace agreement with Israel, which in fairness, the Muslim Brotherhood did at the time too. And so I think we're making the best of a difficult circumstance. What we do not need, none of us would be an Egypt that's approaching 100 million people with incredible numbers of unemployment being in a very unstable situation. That'll make the other problems in the neighborhood seem small to compare to a problem in Egypt. The good news in Egypt is the economy is recovering, and the stability has had some positive impacts. I think the soul searching I responded to, if I understood you correctly, you kept using the word imperialistic. Yeah, imperial overstretch. If you meant that towards the United States, I don't know that you did. Okay. Oh, Turkey's. Oh, okay. Well, then I'll let you answer that. So I think I've addressed everything but the Nobel Prize. The truth is, I'm probably not as well versed as you are and as I should be, but I've read the criticism from the Turkish perspective, and it seems reasonable to me. Seems like a misplaced good opportunity for the Nobel Prize to be awarded to someone who would have a more universalistic set of values that we could all applaud. So I can't give a yes or no, but I certainly, from what I know, it seems like the criticism that I've read is quite valid.
Okay. Thank you for the questions. I think one question regarding Turkey's position with respect to Iran. I could say that we have different nuances with the United States when we look at the Iranian issue. Iran is a big, important neighbor for Turkey, and for a long time, Turkey has a balance with Iran in its relations. We did not went into war or fought with Iran for a very long time, as you know, from the history. However, we see Iran, especially in its regional policies, especially with respect to sectarianism and fueling the sectarian tensions in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen or in other areas, we see this as an important problem for us, for Turkey, and for the whole region. So we have also some concerns regarding the relationship that Iran is sometimes utilizing with the PKK, I would say. Even though we have some agreements with Iran for pursuing the terrorists, together, pragmatically, we sometimes see Iran not behaving correctly with respect to our fight against terrorism. So this is also an important issue that we need to note. Regarding the agreement, the nuclear agreement, as you know, we have supported the agreement with the Obama administration's position, and we do not fully understand why Trump administration is withdrawing from this agreement, which could work if, with good intentions, all parties would be spending some effort on this. It was possible. Of course, we are against any kind of military action against Iran, because, as you know, what we have seen in Iraq, in Syria, and the effects of this on Turkey, the military, action and its aftermath brings huge problems for Turkey, for Europe, for the region. So we need to deal with Iran collectively as far as the nuclear threat is concerned, especially the weaponization of nuclear, nuclear work, we would say. Even though we support every country's, research and production of nuclear, for power generation, it's okay. But as far as the nuclear weapons are concerned, we are as sensitive as the United States. Regarding the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, of course, our president openly says that the democratic process in Egypt was basically terminated, destroyed by the coup attempt, the coup by Sisi, and the support it got from the European countries and with, in some respect, from the United States, is something which should be criticized very clearly, because this group has formed its legitimate political party. I think Freedom of and Justice Party won the elections legitimately, even though they may have made some mistakes in running the country. Every administration makes mistakes. Now, Trump administration is getting all the criticism in United States. Even he's basically, accused by most extreme crimes right now. So in governing a country, any party or any politician may have some mistakes, and in the elections you get the assessment from the people. So I have big criticism for the attitude of the Western countries, especially some European countries, providing support to the military junta regime. And I agree with Robert about the huge human rights, violations there. So the parties associated with Muslim Brotherhood are legitimate political actors. They should have their chance in meeting their country's political, their nation's political expectations. So we have some differences with respect to this as well with the United States. When it comes to Hamas, I think it is a very, very big, mistake to equate it with the PKK issue or YPG issue. It should be totally taken in a different concept, because, as we know, Palestinian territories, the territories where the Palestinian state should be established, are under occupation by another country, by another force. So when your territories are under occupation, and this is well established by the United Nations, resolutions, that nation has a right to resistance. So when you look at their resistance movement, you cannot call them as a terrorist organization, and they have already came into the political process and they won the elections in Palestine. So I think with Robert and with the US congressmen, we need to talk more about how we can see the real situation in Palestine together from a different lens, because if you look at this situation from the viewpoint of Israel only, you cannot get anything right in the Middle East and in the region. You can basically mess up everything in the region if you have only this perspective. And I believe this kind of opinion does not represent the national interest or national, will of the American people as well. Because when you look at the nation, as a nation, the United States sometimes does not pursue its own national interest, but Israel's national interest. So this is not acceptable from my point of view. Any congressman in the United States firstly should look at their own nation's interest, take it as the priority. And another question I would like to actually the issue that I would like to mention is about the S-400 issue, because Robert has made a lot of references to this issue. But if we could have purchased these Patriot systems, timely-wise, I'm saying, from the United States or from any other partner with similar conditions, we would definitely prefer it. And we did not purchase these systems as a reaction to the United States support to PYD-YPG. This has been totally a separate process. We need to look at this from a process, when it started, how it progressed. And initially, as we have all observed, Secretary General of NATO openly declared many times against questions that it's Turkey's legitimate right to purchase weapon systems as long as it does not get integrated into the NATO systems. So this has been declared very openly many times, but the reaction started lately with the United States. They increased the pressure on Turkey. But during the process, we couldn't get the, offer from the United States, because we know the blockages in the U.S. Congress as far as the Turkey's arms, procurement from the United States. We have many, some open, some closed sanctions, I would say, in the last couple of years through the U.S. Congress. They are blocking our purchases, especially in our fight against terrorism. We immediately needed these, drones with the weaponized systems, I would say, but the United States Congress didn't allow it. For these important kind of, decisions, these create erosion of trust. That's why I mentioned that the trust is very important. And as for S-400s, as I said, they are not going to be integrated into the NATO systems. We needed it urgently. He has mentioned the risk from the Iran, from regional countries like Syria, Iraq. All of them have missiles that can hit Turkey, a NATO country. So we would expect the United States, a NATO ally for almost 70 years, to be more proactive and more willing to work with us in providing the Patriot system with good conditions to Turkey, so that we wouldn't go to other, providers. So I think that we need to be fair to Turkey when it looks to S-400's purchase. We are also saying that we are very open to working with the United States, with the military-wise, to make sure that these systems are not going to be present any threat for our F-35s, for other NATO defense mechanisms. We are ready to work with the technical group that our presidents are now, talking about. We would like to, United States to be more basically willing to work with us in bringing this issue to an end, because we want to continue with our F-35 program. We are one of the biggest contributors to this project. So I think that with some dialogue and building trust, I think this S-400 issue can be overcome.
So you want to add something, right?
May I?
But very short, if you mind.
Number one, hopefully the United States and Turkey will work out the missile issue. I'm not optimistic, but hopefully a resolution can be reached that will prevent the operating of the missile system. And it is true that if any American thinks that the missile system is a reaction, Turkey's counter-reaction to America's actions with the PKK, its and associated groups, that would be an incorrect assumption by an American. Very quickly, if I may, regarding Hamas, which I think is important because this is an American position. It's not an Israeli position. And there's a history to this, starting with 1937 with the Peel Commission, well before the establishment even in the State of Israel. The UN effectively offered 75% of Greater Israel to the Arab side and 25% to the Jewish side. Jewish side said yes, Arab side said no. Then you had the UN mandate in 1948, which was closer to 50-50. Again, the Jewish side said yes, the Arab side said no. And then you had offers made by Prime Minister Barak under the auspices of negotiations with President Clinton and Chairman Arafat, where Palestinians were offered about 93% of the West Bank and Gaza. Chairman Arafat said no. Prime Minister Olmert, 8 years later, offered a more generous offer, which was not responded to. There are three conditions that Hamas is asked to accept, not by the United States, not by Israel, but by the international community. The UN, the quartet, of which, of course, Turkey and the United States are a part of. What are those three conditions? Renounce violence, recognize Israel's right to exist, and accept the agreements that the Palestinian Authority entered into. Hamas has not agreed to those three very reasonable conditions. And that's why, on top of its actions where it targets civilians publicly and very proudly, the United States and the European Union view Hamas as a terrorist organization.
Thank you. The earliest question actually had I think it was about the personal relationship between Erdogan and Trump, and if there's a new president, what happens to that? I think it's important to underline something Robert said that we've been discussing past couple days. The strategic divergence. There are interests that are diverging. And those are real. So U.S. president defined ISIS, killing Americans in Iraq and then taking over a territory that basically eliminates most of Iraqi-Syria border, right? He decided that was the biggest threat at that moment, and no matter the cost, he was going to eliminate it. But because of the soul searching we talked about, he didn't want any U.S. troops. And then he gave the Pentagon this mission, but you can't use American soldiers in the fighting. You can only support local forces and go find local forces. So they found PKK, which had a very good sort of command and control. PKK saw that opportunity and jumped on it, and they showed that they can take territory away from ISIS. That was their way. And at the time, Turkey was trying to resolve the Kurdish question at home, right? So, but indirectly, U.S. investment in the PKK by changing the name at the time they're good at that. That's their common practice at home here as well. They'll create branches, youth branches. There's millions of names that are. So anyway, it was a technicality to help U.S. overcome its legal issues, because you can't. U.S. government cannot support a terrorist organization. So they had a creative solution there. They changed their name, etc. My point is, once U.S. identified the policy that way and then defined it in such a way that U.S. soldiers cannot be on the ground doing this fighting, they helped other groups in Iraq, and then in Syria they helped the PKK. And that actually, I think, was a big contributing factor to the resolution process to fail. So the problem is, that was supposed to be temporary, and it wasn't. It didn't become temporary. The communication lines between US and Turkey essentially broke down. Turkey came up with offers to work together against ISIS, but once that mission was given to the military, and the basically, leadership didn't come back and re-question that policy, then basically US interest to fight ISIS was in direct contradiction with Turkey's interest in defending its national security against PKK. So what I'm getting at is, next president comes, Trump, right? He wants to also defeat ISIS and claim victory for it. And he continues that policy. So next president, whoever it is going to want to do the same thing. So that promises a continued deep divergence on this particular policy. And it is like Mr. Chonkar said, it's poisoning the relationship. It's impacting everything else, because it's killing trust. When you're talking about S-400 or any other issue, you don't really trust the other side because you think that the US is undermining your national security. It's a fundamental problem, and it's not going to be resolved through change of leadership, I think. It will only change with a fundamental change in the policies of either countries or both countries. Threat perception on Iran is nuanced. It's not the same. Broadly, Turkey doesn't want a nuclear Iran. It's uncomfortable about the regional outreach of Iran, and it doesn't want a US attack on Iran, wants to continue so there is broad convergence, but quite a bit of differences as well. I don't think they're on the exact same page. I share most of what Mr. Chonkar said about Egypt. Turkey sees, Sisi as an illegitimate government because he came with a coup, and he's been persecuting Muslim Brotherhood members. There's no due process. Economy, as Roberts mentioned, is doing slightly better, let's say, but I'm not convinced it's a fundamentally strong economy, and it is that kind of pressure, authoritarian pressures and repression is recipe for, I think, disaster in the coming years. I don't think he's that stable, that country, and then there too, like US seems to be kind of reverting back to, okay, investment in stable kind of authoritarian leader there. So that's a problematic policy, but we don't have a lot of time to talk about it. One last thing, I don't think Turkey is pursuing an imperial policy. I said global role. That means being engaged in problems as far as Afghanistan, the Africa, piracy in the international waters, being strong in its neighborhood, in the Balkans, in the Middle East, in Black Sea. So I don't see that as imperial, obviously. But there's a confusion, right? These are former Ottoman territories Balkans, etc. So Turkey at the local level could be perceived in that manner. But I think it's just like the UK has tons of influence in India. Like when you listen to BBC News, always towards the end of the hour, they'll have 5-10 minutes of segments on anything about India, women's rights, etc. So I think it's natural that Turkey has stronger interest in its neighborhood, in its Balkans, etc. And I think with S-400, it's the last thing. Turkey, there was a communication breakdown there as well. And I think that was partly because of the PKK issue. Turkey talked about its national air defense needs for a long time, but it wasn't really taken seriously. And I think that goes back to my original point about global versus regional power dynamic. For the US, those kind of threats along Turkish border is not that serious and imminent by Russia, for instance, but for Turkey, those threats appear much bigger. So, so I think there's a problem with scale. So the only thing you can do is to make sure that that your bigger ally understands your perception on that and how you perceive that threat accurately. It's true, like Robert said, they did send the Patriots for a period of time, but pulling them out, especially without even consultations and asking Turkey enough, like it was a matter of weeks that they announced that they were going to pull them out, and they pulled them out without really consulting. So that also eroded trust there. So I think I agree with the communications and trust and talking a lot more about these issues to overcome the challenges in the US-Turkey relations, I think.
Regarding the Hamas issue, Robert rightly mentioned some attacks to civilians by Hamas. And I am aware of that, and we do not condone this. That's a terrorist activity to, target the civilians. This happened, but they afterwards basically stopped this, and they did not they did not continue this kind of an activity. But if we speak the truth, FETÖ targeted the civilians, PYD, YPG targeted the civilians. Sometimes Israeli government targeted the civilians, and Sisi targeted the civilians. So we need to implement the same standard to all of them. I mean, we need to be, I think, principled in this respect.
The focus of the discussion is not, but the PKK is a terrorist group. There's no question. Hamas is a terrorist group. They target civilians. I only wish the statement that they've stopped or minimized was accurate. They continue to, you don't build tunnels and create plans to kidnap civilians if you're a legitimate military operation. The Turkish military isn't doing that, and neither is the American, and neither is the Israeli. And it would be helpful for our Turkish friends. This isn't an American-Turkish argument, but there are Palestinians that are completely committed to a peaceful resolution. They are not in Hamas. They're in Fatah. And that's where Turkey's support ought to go.
Turkey's perception on Hamas, as you well know, changed in 2006, I believe, the elections. After that, they said this is a legitimate political party, and they tried to bring them into the picture because actually Israel itself also, in practice recognizes what, Hamas, they have a sort of, I don't know how to describe it, but they understand each other, etc. So I think it's a bit more obviously nuanced that the way Turkey perceives Hamas.
Yes, this is a very important topic that we should organize panel in DC. Yeah. One thing.
Robert is missing something. YPG-PYD.
Just one thing?
Yes, here, in this respect.
You are lucky.
Just in Ankara, YPG-PYD had targeted civilians with 2 suicide car bombings. Right across here, about maybe 1 kilometer to here, we had 2 suicide car bombings directly targeting our civilians. They targeted policemen in Istanbul, in Beşiktaş, Dolmabahçe, and these terrorists were trained in the YPG camps. They took their logistics and material from there. So I think we need to also mention YPG as well here.
Very fair.
Yeah, we have to take into consideration also the changing stance of Hamas against Israel. Just 2 years ago, they announced a new policy orientation in the context of framing Israel. So, but this is a very important.
In fairness, have you read what they? I'm not
At
quizzing
least they
you.
recognize the existence
No.
of Israel.
I've read that probably 20 times.
And you didn't find any word about
What they took out of their original agreement was the extreme anti-Semitism. And that's a good thing. But they still do not recognize the state of Israel, which is a legitimate nation under the rules of international law. They still do not renounce violence against civilians. I only wish that they did. And they do not accept the agreements that the Palestinian Authority, the duly recognized by the international community body of Palestinians, they don't accept the agreements that their own leaders have entered into.
Yeah, there is fragmentation in Palestinian politics, domestic fragmentation. Okay, so I would like to really thank you for all of you for coming today, and I would like to thank all the speakers for their invaluable, comments. It was a very fruitful discussion. Thank you. Please join me to thank all.